Hi class, this is just a relatively brief video on an item that we are looking at as far as our learning outcomes for the week. And I want to take a little bit of time this week just to talk about one aspect in particular because it's something that comes up um, as much in our personal life as it may in a therapeutic setting. So one of the things that I want to talk about today is the microaggressions topic. And um, really, when we're looking at microaggressions, think of them, and this is also in conjunction with certainly your readings for the week, but just to kind of summarize and in certain cases maybe simplify some of these ideas and hopefully make them a little bit more relatable to your everyday life, and then just thinking about the the possibility of microaggressions making them their way into a therapeutic setting or a professional setting. And so when we think about microaggressions, I kind of like to think of them as small and unintentional comments or behaviors. Sometimes they may manifest as even a perceived backhanded compliment, if you've ever heard that term before, but they can kind of communicate some negative and some stereotypical messages. And the intent doesn't always equal the impact when we think about those items. So the statement, for example, you may have an opportunity to try to compliment somebody and say, "Wow, you're really articulate." Um, it's a compliment. The words are a compliment, but the context needs to be considered. So when we think about the trusting relationship we're trying to cultivate with our clients, and the power in the room, even if it's not intentional, even if we're not trying to own power or project power over clients or anything like that, these folks are coming in very vulnerable and sharing some of the most personal aspects of themselves with you. And that's all based on trust. And so going back to an example like, wow, you're really articulate, it is a compliment, but you can see, hopefully, you can see by the tone, the tonality, the context, the setting, it may come off as you were expecting me to not be, for example, or stating something like, "Where are you really from?" or "Where are you from?" And again, the words themselves may not, there may be no intent to cause harm there. And certainly I wouldn't expect that from anyone in our course or in our classes. But it suggests that there could be a suggestion there, or the between the lines implication, especially if there is a perceived power imbalance from the client standpoint, is perhaps, where are you from? Um, I'm from here. I've lived my entire life here, wherever here is, and so they may come in with a feeling of belonging to a community, to a place, and asking a question like that, it can be suggestive, even if the words aren't intended to be harmful in any way. So this is just an illustration of words really matter. Tonality really matters. The way we present ourselves to our clients, it all really matters. And so much of what we do is very detail oriented. And that's why in a lot of cases, and I know the last example I gave was a question, but asking questions to pull out those answers, to make a note that they're articulate, and you can validate that in other ways. Stating something like, "You're such an articulate person. I really appreciate how you were able to um, provide me with that reflection. Um, what more can you say about that?" Uh, in that case, you've changed the context. You've given the positive reinforcement, and you've prompted them to continue on with it, and it's encouraging. And it also states that you want to hear more about what they have to say. Um, Asking a question, have you lived your entire life in the community, or have you has your did you grow up in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Texas or wherever you may be from, just to get an idea of how they identify with their community, where they identify with, how they see themselves within the context of their community. let them define those types of things, and just be thinking about how you present questions to get the information. There are so many different ways to do this. Um, and using some of the examples that I mentioned, just think through some of those things, project yourself into the role of a counselor or a therapist. Some of you are already in a similar type role, and just maybe what you can do is just reflect on some interactions that you've had that maybe didn't feel quite right, or maybe something didn't come off quite right. And I'm not asking you to think about what you did wrong, because we will make mistakes when it comes to this stuff. We just will. And I'm a firm believer that relationships in almost all contexts are recoverable, and with good communication, and um, so regaining trust, I think, is very possible. But these are things that we want to make sure that we are aware of. And the types of microaggressions, I mean, we kind of go from, if you want to call it a microaggression, it's maybe defined more as a micro assault, but you could also call it a macroaggression, I suppose. But being more intentional, over to maybe using a slur, which is something we certainly wouldn't do, but it falls sort of under the umbrella that it's going to be more overt. Something like a micro insult, a subtle put down, or an assumption. So kind of going back to an example I used, an assumption: where are you really from? Or maybe we wouldn't even say really from, but where are you from? It is suggestive in a way. So we really need to use our empathy. We really need to project ourselves in the moment, and this takes practice, because we need to be in our role as practitioners, but also we need to be not just interacting with our clients, but also projecting ourselves in their role in the moment. And so that takes some time. How would I feel if I say this? And that needs to be done relatively quickly, or there can be kind of a build-up. You can kind of be preparing yourself as you're asking sort of more slow rolling questions. You can be thinking about, this is going to be a pivotal question for this session, or that's my hypothesis anyways, is this is going to be a really important question, and I think we're going to go somewhere with this. What is the best way to present it? And then finally, sort of like a micro invalidation. So dismissing lived experiences, saying something like, that's not really what we define as trauma, but it's an invalidation. Um, it ultimately, in session, if someone feels like they've experienced trauma around something, it can be very difficult for us as practitioners to think, well, yes, you perceive this as trauma, but I have worked with folks who, um, maybe in your opinion, have experienced far, quote unquote, worse, and that's entirely up to the client, to perceive that they could be feeling emotions as strongly or stronger than somebody that has maybe gone through a more protracted example of what they're giving. And you might say, well, that was more traumatic. We want to be really careful about those types of things. You can certainly, think through that and use it to frame a session or frame how you go about a session. But we want to be really careful about being outward with those types of messages, even if they come from a place of good intention, or we want to educate them. It's not usually the time to do that when you have somebody opening up, offering trust, and just looking for somebody, who really understands them, or at the very least is willing to understand them. So we want to be just really careful to not create more stress or exhaustion or self-doubt, validate negative thoughts, negative emotions that they're feeling, questions that they're having around, maybe they do have some doubt that this was really traumatic and not compared to another person. We want to be really careful about that, because their lived experience is their experience, period. So it's our job to help them dig into that, process through it, emphasize the strengths they have, how they can use those strengths um, to help them in different situations. Because a lot of times, in fact, almost invariably, our strengths are transferable skills that can help us in many different situations or contexts. So we want to be really, really careful about those things because they can cause ruptures in relationships. And it really matters how we respond, our words, tonality, between the lines, eye contact, body language matters an awful lot. So we just need to be really careful and self-aware. Self-awareness is something that's very, very important when it comes to any type of um, practitioner activity. But when we think about microaggressions within this context in particular, we need to be really careful about that. So some more effective responses is just acknowledging the impact, validating that the emotions that they're feeling, taking responsibility, staying curious and open about their taking responsibility, meaning if we're sort of leaning towards one direction, maybe kind of correcting the statement, the question, clarifying the question. So taking responsibility really meaning clarifying anything like that, staying curious and open, and also avoiding any type of defensiveness or over explaining as well. In general, we don't want to be the one doing the most talking in the session. Certainly, there are times when we need to explain approaches, or if we're working with folks on a new technique, or really trying to explain a therapeutic approach. Certainly, there's times when we're going to need to talk and explain that, but stopping and asking questions, making sure our clients are having the floor as much as possible is very, very important. So remember, sort of working towards the closing here. Remember that we do, as practitioners, hold the power in the room, and um, again, this may be unintentional. This may be, that's not what I want in my office. That's not what I'm about. No, I won't do that. Unfortunately, those things aren't really up to us. We don't get to decide that. We can do our best to project that and try to quell that a little bit, but we need to be really careful and just acknowledge that somebody's coming in and it's up to them. I mean, we proverbially, we open the door for folks, and it's up to them if they want to walk through, meaning offer trust, offer some of the things that have been repressed for a really long time in folks. And so in that respect, we do hold that power. I don't want to say over folks, but within the room. And thinking about microaggressions and how they carry more weight in unequal relationships. So going back to that power dynamic, just thinking and being aware of it, that the perception on the other side of the desk or the coffee table or whatever it is could be very different from your own as far as it comes to a power imbalance. And really trying to establish and, in certain cases, force a type of neutrality, even going into over explaining neutrality. And I don't want there to be a power imbalance, and I don't want to just be very careful about that, because that can be a situation where, while we're intentionally trying to achieve an outcome, it may, especially in when somebody's in a vulnerable state of mind, it may cause actually a question of, is there actually a power imbalance here? Or get them thinking about something like, yeah, there really is kind of a power imbalance, because I'm the one opening up here, and I'm the one who's looking, who is offering the trust here. So it can be difficult. It can be a little bit of a dance, to navigate the whole situation around microaggressions. But the big lesson here is we want to make sure that we're doing no harm, that we're respecting client dignity. Everybody gets to walk through the door both ways, maintaining their dignity, and that's really important. So we need to understand, though, at the same time, that we're going to make mistakes with these things. What matters is that we notice these things, and when or if we notice them, we seek to repair and learn from it, repair a relationship, acknowledge it tactfully, and even if it's not called out, maybe it's not the right client to call it out explicitly, there are still ways more implicitly to address something that was asked in maybe a way you regret, or in upon reflection you wish you would have approached a little bit differently. There is room to do that, and so we don't want to be too hard on ourselves here, certainly, but it is important to practice that self-awareness, and make sure that we are just really paying attention to microaggressions and just the words going back to, and this is a couple times I've repeated it, but it's worth repeating, is words matter, context matters. So these things are all very, very important. So I just wanted to spend about 15 minutes here just offering you some additional context on microaggressions in practice in particular. So this is all meant to just supplement the text. This doesn't, nothing that I've said do I expect to see in a discussion post or anything. This is just supplementary information for you and for your consideration. So thank you for taking the time to watch. And I do appreciate the hard work that's being done here so far in the class. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take good care.